Hi, everybody. This is Alan Fine. I'm here today with Chiara Giorgi, who's the Global Brand Director for Seatrade Cruise. Now, we've been talking to a lot of cruise lines, but now we get a chance to stand back and talk about the entire industry at once at a quite a pivotal time. And this is Insider Travel Report. So the last time we spoke, we were in Manhattan, and we were talking about this wonderful event that was about to come up, the 35th edition of Seatrade, which was going to be in April. And the sky was the limit. The world was our oyster. And then something happened. Now, My question to you is, I know that you're going to do Seatrade on April 12th of 21. Is it still going to be the 35th or is it going to be the 36th?
No, it's going to be the 35th. We really, we need to celebrate that milestone. And there were a lot of things that we were going to do for the first time this year in April, and we really are looking to still do those next year for 21. So yeah.
Well, you'll have a lot of time to practice. It'll be a perfect presentation.
Hopefully,
will that be your first live event?
Yeah, actually. So throughout the year, we've been monitoring the situation, and unfortunately, you will have heard yesterday that we've made the decision to not postpone our Seatrade Cruise Med event in Malaga to December, and instead to host Seatrade Cruise Med in Malaga in 2022. And in the interim, we are going to be having Seatrade Cruise Virtual, so our first ever virtual event, and that will take place the week of October 5th.
And I'm assuming, that's going to be a big event. So everybody should tune in. But do you have other smaller events?
No, so this will be our big event that will bring together all the usual elements of our live events. So we will have a trade show element. We will have a conference element. We will have a networking and matchmaking element. And there'll be a way for us to showcase the innovation that is currently happening in the industry. So that will be the one big event, and we are, the plan is to be able to cater it to the entire world because we are a global industry. In the interim, however, we have launched what we are calling Seatrade Cruise Talks. Those were launched about 5 weeks ago, and they are currently taking place on Seatrade Cruise News. That is our online news source. And it's actually a long-term strategy. It's something that we were planning on doing, but sort of in a year or 2 years' time. And we've brought forth because of the situation that we're in. And the idea is to roll out a piece of digital content on a weekly basis from now to eternity. And once our events are back online, those will work in conjunction with one another and complement one another.
Yeah, there's no reason to stop.
No, absolutely. There's so much going on in the industry, whether we were in the period that we're in right now affected by COVID-19 or not. For us, the ability to bring everybody together on a weekly basis and to help guide and educate as best as we can has so far been really, really, it's been great to see the uptick. So
you guys are facilitators. You bring all of the cruise lines together with all of the many suppliers and all the travel advisors, and you facilitate. But now, if a travel advisor wants to participate in these weeklies, what's the address they should go to?
So it would be on our Seatrade Cruise News website. So it'd be www.seatrade-cruise.com. And then on there, I would suggest going to that website anyway, because our editors have been doing an incredible job of keeping up to date with the news of what's going on in the industry. So that's definitely the place to go to for any up-to-date information on what the cruise lines are doing and what anyone within the industry is doing right now. And then on there, you'll find our blog, but you'll also find Seatrade Cruise Talks, and that's where anything that we've put out there, it lives. And you can access it anytime.
Great. All right. So what's going to happen to the cruise industry in rebound? I know this morning there was a talk about the steps to getting the cruise industry up and running. What do you think those steps need to be?
There's a lot around communication. There are a lot of moving parts to getting the industry back up and running. It's not just about the vessel itself and making sure that the vessel is up to code to keep people healthy. It's how do the ports and the destinations that they're sailing to, how do they get to the place where they're have the same protocols that are taking place on board the vessel? So, it's one thing to get a passenger on board, make sure and screen them and make sure that they are healthy. But then when they stop in a port and they get off and they interact with people, how do you do that again? So there's a lot going on.
We really don't want someone to contract anything and have it blamed on the ship.
Exactly. Because unfortunately, I think anyone within the industry has very clearly seen an unjust representation by the media on what has been happening.
Not here, but yes.
Yes, no. Those who know. And I think that is part of what the industry now needs to do, and that's rebuild that confidence. The really wonderful thing is we've seen all the statistics that current cruisers, people who have cruised before, I mean, I'm a cruiser and I would cruise tomorrow. I worked on board. I know how vessels work. Like, I have every confidence that they will be back up and running without problems. But it's restoring that confidence in people who were potentially thinking of taking their first cruise, who might now be deterred by some of the things that they've read. And I think that's where travel advisors really can play a huge role in this, and making sure to restore that confidence, and making people excited to cruise again, because it's still a fantastic way to see the world.
Hopefully with the travel advisors, we're preaching to the choir. I mean, a ship has its own hospital. A ship has all the you clean before you do anything on a ship. Mm-hmm. So that if you're gonna go anywhere to be safe, a ship, I agree with you, and that's the message that has to go out.
It is. It absolutely. And one of the other things that I don't know that is fully being discussed right now, but I do think is a big piece of the industry coming back online, is the conversations are currently happening between the cruise lines and the ports and the destinations as to how, those destinations will open up their borders again and allow the cruise lines to come in again. But you can't forget that those local communities, some of them, you need to restore that confidence in those local communities. Because if the local communities are scared of the impact of the cruises coming back, then those borders aren't necessarily going to open. So there's that as well that has to happen.
Well, that's the balance that's global, the balance between health and commerce. Mm-hmm. And so these destinations need the income. At the same time, they're fearful of it. And so the communication has to get past that hurdle, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. But I'd also say that this is a perfect, I think earlier I mentioned innovation. Like, this is the perfect moment for not only the cruise lines to potentially, I wouldn't say reinvent themselves, because you don't want that, but to really think through some of the protocols that they do have, or some of the technologies that they utilize, and really think outside the box and bring something in that's new. I would say the same with some of the ports and destinations out there. And so some of those destinations who might have previously complained around the numbers of tourists that they were receiving into their cities, they've now gone to the opposite end of it, right? And so this could be the perfect opportunity for them to rethink do we put different protocols in place? Like, where is the happy medium where we're not scared of the amount of tourism or tourists that are coming into our cities, but at the same time recognizing that a lot of what makes the city run and a lot of the money that is coming in from the tourists. So how do you find that happy medium too?
Let's switch subjects to something you mentioned when we last spoke. At a time when people are looking for, well, the new luxury is space.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that expedition cruising is the place people would gravitate to. And you had a new group, was it? A Seatrade Cruise Expedition. Let's see where that is now.
Yeah, I think the general consensus, again, I would just say I work for Seatrade, and we try our very best to represent the entire industry and bring the entire industry together. I do not work for any of the cruise lines. I do not work for any of the ports. So this is very much just part assumption, part conversations that I've had. But generally speaking, what I have heard is that when you look at luxury cruise lines, river, and expedition, especially, those three are probably going to bounce back faster than the larger vessels. And that, as you just said, in the current climate, you're looking for that space. You're looking for less numbers. Seeing crowds of people is not something that is attractive at this moment in time. So for me, expedition is going to be a big piece. When you look at some of those vessels, the smaller vessels, they also have the flexibility and the agility to go to places that these larger vessels can't go. And expedition is a step ahead because they've already started to uncover where are these, small cities and towns and locations around the world that allow people to see something completely different and more remote. Yeah, for sure. Expedition is going to be an interesting, and for us, that's not slowing down. So although our plan was to launch Seatrade Cruise Expedition properly in Malaga, actually at Seatrade Cruise Med, we were going to do a soft launch in April in Miami. We're still going ahead with plans around Seatrade Cruise Expedition because that is still a very big market for the industry.
Well, what is it exactly? Is it just a focus on?
Yeah, it's just a deeper focus on it. We're looking at how we can do that with the virtual event. The virtual event will obviously be a little bit different. When our initial plans when it came to Seatrade Cruise Med was we were going to have a zone on the show floor. So it was actually a space that you would go to with exhibitors that represented the supply chain for the expedition area, and then content fully dedicated to expedition cruising. We're looking at how we can potentially bring some of that into our virtual event, but obviously in a different way. So there'll be discussions around it for sure. But next year at Global, I think we'll probably do a little bit more again. So
we talked when we were last together about all the ships on order. And there were so many because expectation was so great. So the question now is, how do the cruise lines feel about this inventory? Will they be retiring ships quicker? Will they be purpose building, changing the ships? What is the scuttlebutt? What have you been hearing?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's one that is definitely being discussed many times. They're not at a place yet that they're really talking about it. What I can say is I haven't seen any cancellations of orders yet. And I have seen new orders being placed.
That's good.
Which is great, which is really, really great. And that is something that we should be, looking towards. What I'm really interested is to see if any of these orders that are currently in the works, if those plans are going to be altered slightly. Going back to what we were talking about earlier with the innovation, and obviously there will be new protocols. And so how is that going to alter how ships are being built? Space. Will inside cabins still be a thing? there's a lot that's going. It's going to be an interesting period of time for the industry. I mean, I personally, I'm really excited to see just generally the level of innovation that comes out of this entire period of lockdown, because I do think that there's been a lot of creative moments throughout the world, and so I'm really intrigued to see what comes out of here.
But Seatrade's in an interesting position where it's not just reacting to the cruise lines. You're also looking at the suppliers, and they're coming up with the innovations. They may
Absolutely.
actually be driving it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that's the part that's really exciting, and that's the part that I've always been excited about the cruise industry. Is I really do believe that it is a very innovative industry, and they're constantly coming up with great new ideas, and that is what's happening right now. And you're seeing that through technology that's being developed for testing, for biometrics, for air filtration systems, name it, it's there. There's a lot going on. Even masks and, I'm really intrigued to see how it all comes together at the end. What I'm also really interested to see, and not just for the cruise industry, I'm talking about the entire world, climate change before this and our issues with plastic before this. How is that going to continue now in light of everything that we've gone through? For me, some of the saddest moments through these past 3 months is seeing the amount of masks and gloves and whatever it is that are disposed of everywhere. And I felt like we were getting to a place where single-use plastics were becoming less and less of a daily of having a daily usage. And I'm just a little bit worried about what that's going to look like moving forward. But at the same time, that leads to innovation too, because there's definitely a lot of people who have been, for the past years, figuring out how to have straws that aren't plastic straws. We'll do the same with gloves and with masks and all the other PPE that we've been using. So.
Well, I commiserate with you on that. I've been thinking the same thing. Listen, we got to start wrapping this up. So let's bring this in for our travel advisors. We had said that Seatrade was a great place to get an edge on the cruising industry. And I think that would be easier now with your weekly virtual talks and things like that. Do you have any other advice for the travel advisor at this time?
I think just continue being the voice for the cruise industry. You guys are the ones who are talking directly with those consumers, with the people that will help this industry bounce back. As I mentioned earlier, those who cruised before, I don't think we've lost them in this. I think that they are still very confident about cruising, but it's really getting those first-time cruisers to be excited and interesting in cruising again. I just want to thank you for everything that you guys are doing, and continue doing it, continue spreading the good word, and we'll be back in no time.
Well, those are good inspiring words, a good pep talk. I'm so appreciative of seeing you again. I hope to see you in person. Maybe it'll be at that event in Miami next year.
Hopefully.
And so keep up the good work, keep us informed, and we'll talk again, I hope.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Alan.
And this is Alan Fine for Insider Travel Report.